Has America's enemy number one become its friend number two? I'm talking about China. The ties between the two superpowers seem to be thawing. And why am I saying that? Due to the recent events. Let's break them down for you. Chinese President Xi Jinping and the US President Joe Biden are set to meet later this month, remember, in San Francisco, and this would be at the upcoming Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum Summit. The last time the two leaders met face-to-face was in November 2022. In the run-up to the expected bilateral, several other high-level meetings between Chinese and American diplomats are taking place. And this week, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will meet her Chinese counterpart in San Francisco. Yellen would be hosting the Chinese Vice Premier for 2 days, and the two are expected to discuss several issues. This includes America's concerns about unfair Chinese economic practices and the potential areas for cooperation like climate change, debt relief. Now, this comes 4 months after Yellen traveled to Beijing to meet the Premier Li Qiang and the Vice Premier, who assumed responsibility for the Chinese economy in March. Now, only days ago, Wang Yi was on a 3-day visit to Washington, remember, and there he met with the President, Joe Biden, as well as the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and the National Security Advisor. The ministers discussed military exchanges between the US and China, and they also talked about the crises in West Asia and Ukraine. You see, when the Trump administration was in power, a trade war broke out between the US and China, and that is not all. There was also a war of words between the two sides, and since then, the ties have only soured. China's spy balloons and America's restrictions on its investments in China have made matters worse. And the US has steadily expanded sanctions against the Chinese companies, mainly due to national security and human rights concerns. But the fact of the matter is, the US needs to work closely with China now. And why is that? Reason number one, due to Beijing's close ties with West Asia. Traditionally, you see, China has focused on economic engagement with the Arab world, but in recent months, it has been more than willing to mediate regional conflicts. Earlier in the year, China brokered the Saudi-Iran normalization agreement, and this highlighted the dragon's growing influence in West Asia. Beijing has also shown interest in de-escalating the Israel-Palestine crisis and renewing the Iran nuclear agreement. Other than diplomacy, China and the US need to be on good terms for the sake of their economies. Even though the superpowers are locked in an intense economic competition, they together represent 40% of the global output. They remain integral partners in multiple ways. They sell and buy important products from each other. They finance each other's businesses and develop apps for each other. Not to forget, they provide a home to millions of each other's people. China is America's third largest trading partner after Canada and Mexico. US imports of goods and services from China hit a record high last year. Not just that, back in 2021, US exports to China supported nearly 1.1 million jobs in the country. The diplomatic ties between the two countries frayed, but now it looks like China is returning from out of the cold. And as we speak about that, Australia and China also have made a huge announcement. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with the President Xi Jinping, advocated for increasing high-level interactions between the two sides, and this includes the revival of the annual Leaders' Dialogue. He also extended an invitation to Xi Jinping for a visit to Australia. You see, it's not just the US. Another AUKUS partner is warming up to China. Is this a diplomatic victory for the dragon? And once again, Delhi is choking, facing a severe air crisis. People in India's national capital are literally gasping for breath amid serious air pollution levels. And while the governments continue to engage in finger-pointing, passing the buck, the Supreme Court of India has condemned what it called the murder of the people's health. India's highest court has leveled some serious accusations today. The question is, who is responsible for this murder? Is it the citizens of Delhi struggling to breathe in their own city? Is it the government tasked with safeguarding the well-being of its people? Or do the neighboring state governments share the responsibility? The culprit in this case is complacency. And we will tell you why in this report.
Once again, it's that time of the year in India's national capital region, when this bustling metropolis begins to resemble the order of people's health. But the government has taken action. The central government launched a national clean air campaign. The goal is to cut particulate pollution by up to 30% by 2024. Meanwhile, the state government, led by AAP, introduced measures like reimposing the odd-even rule for vehicles, limiting cars based on their number plates on alternate days. So, what's the path forward? Science-based policies are the need of the hour, and the highest level of political commitment is essential. Tough penalties for non-compliance must be enforced. As the city remains shrouded in choking smog, the words of the Supreme Court resonate as a stark reminder of the dire health consequences at stake. As for the question of who bears the responsibility for this crisis, perhaps it's a measure of complacency at all levels that urgently requires addressing. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
30 days of bombing, 30 days of air raids. What's left of Gaza 1 month into this war? Not much. Here are some satellite images. This is what Gaza looked like before the war started, and this is what the enclave looks like right now. Before the war began, Gaza was home to over 2 million people. The enclave is, remember, sandwiched between Israel and the Mediterranean Sea. It is all of 41 kilometers long. The war has split the strip of land into two. There is North Gaza and the South. North is where Gaza City is. North is also where most of the bombing and the fighting has been concentrated. That's not to say that South is safe or has not been affected, because it has. And how? In the last 30 days, we have been showing you visuals of the bombing in Khan Yunis in south, also the Rafah border, Gaza's only crossing not controlled by Israel. Bombs have also hit refugee camps in the south. In fact, since we wrapped our show last night itself, at least 16 people have been killed in Rafah. There have been casualties in Khan Yunis as well. This resident in Khan Yunis saying that there is nothing left in Gaza, and he is waiting for death.
We are tired. We are destroyed. People have been destroyed. Their lives are destroyed. Children are destroyed. Women and children died. All of them died. No one is left in Gaza. Is anyone left in Gaza? No one remains. Thank God we are safe. But I swear we are waiting the death. It will be better than living. We are waiting for death in each moment. It's a suspended death.
This is the queue for water in South Gaza. Thousands lining up here every day to get to a water hose and then fill up their canisters.
This water canister is distributed to at least 4 families. Each canister is 2 to 3 liters. May God help us.
And the situation in the north is worse, by the way. At least a quarter of the buildings in the north have either been destroyed or damaged, at least a quarter. Apart from homes, hospitals, schools, bakeries and other infrastructure also being hit. Among the most affected areas being Jabalia, Gaza's largest refugee camp. It has been bombed multiple times, in fact, and this is what it looks like a month into this war.
نحن الآن في منطقة الست. هذا المكان مكتظ بالسكان.
And this is Beit Hanun in northeastern Gaza.
אבל הניצחון הזה כרוך לא רק במאמץ מלחמתי צבאי,
The question is, what happens to these areas once the war is over? Netanyahu says Israel will assume overall security of Gaza. But what does that even mean? Will boots stay on the ground? Is that what Netanyahu is hinting at? Over 10,000 people have died in Gaza in the last 30 days. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have reportedly been killed over a 4-week period than in any conflict in at least 3 decades. More United Nations aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization.
In fact, half of the housing units in Gaza have been at least partially destroyed. Within a month, Gaza has lost 61% of its jobs. 61%. That is according to the United Nations Labour Agency. The UN body has warned that the economic fallout of this war will be felt for, quote-unquote, many years to come. The job loss does not end at Gaza, by the way. The ILO estimating that West Bank also has lost 24% of its employment in a month. This is equal to some 208,000 jobs. The ILO saying, when combined, the job losses in Gaza and the West Bank amounting to a daily income loss of about $16 million. In Gaza, over 80% of the population already lives below the poverty line. What happens to them now?